Hello there. Today I'm chatting with Soon-Hwa Wong, the current chairperson of PARTA, the Pacific Asia Travel Association. When something like COVID-19 happens, members look to their trade associations for wisdom, guidance and representation on some of the biggest issues they face in recovering their businesses. It's fascinating to see how far PARTA have moved in the last 9 months, their ambitions for the future, and most importantly, how they have supported their members and represented them in discussions with various governments and authorities. Soon-Hwa provides all of those valuable insights and more, so enjoy the chat and look forward to speaking to you soon. So hello everyone, I'm delighted to be joined by Soon-Hwa, the chair at PARTA, the Pacific Asia Travel Association, who is based in Singapore. Soon-Hwa, good evening in Singapore, how are you?
Very well, good morning John.
It's good to hear from you. Firstly, congratulations on the appointment, because that has only happened in the last couple of months, I believe.
Yes, it was somewhat overdue because of the COVID situation.
And overdue because it was delayed by 6...
because we had, like a lot of other associations, we had to move our meetings around. So the AGM was actually moved to a much later date, yeah.
So does that mean you get just a 6-month tenure, or you get an extended tenure because of that?
Well, I was volunteered for another 6 months, so meaning that there is 18 months now. So that's a bonus. Yeah.
Right. So tell me, how did you become involved in travel? Because it is the most dynamic activity in Asia, isn't it? Or has been for many years.
You know, this was like 40 years ago, exactly 40 years ago in 1980, when I came out fresh from university. At that time, most people would aim to work in a bank. I did business administration. So many of my classmates were heading straight to a financial institution. It's so much more prestigious to work in a bank. You get good pay, good privileges. But somehow I got into the travel and tourism business, starting off really with car rental. Yeah, I started off with Avias Rent a Car.
Right. So did you travel globally or just within the region?
No, at that time it was more for Avias in Singapore. So for 5 years I was with the company. And after that, I switched over to a travel agent where we had the inbound, outbound, corporate travel representation business. So that brought me into the travel agency business. So that was for 2 years. And then I joined the airline. So that was maybe at that time was the entry into the travel and tourism proper. So I started working in the airline as the regional manager for Southeast Asia for Air New Zealand, based in Singapore, looking after the Southeast Asia region. Yeah.
Wow. So that must have been fascinating, because at that time, I mean, the market was growing rapidly. Air New Zealand, quite a big player in Singapore, lots of traffic. That must have been a fascinating role, and must have enjoyed it for quite some time.
Yeah, that was five and a half years, really nice, because at that time, Air New Zealand only had flights from New Zealand to Singapore. And when I came on board, we put on flights to Bali, to Malaysia, to Bangkok. So it was during a period of expansion. So that was really nice to have the first-hand experience of opening up new countries, new cities. So 5.5 years, truly enjoyed that, yeah.
and lots of responsibilities. So where did you move on to from there? That must have been hard to leave Air New Zealand.
Then in 1993, Hertz, was looking for someone who could start up the Asia office to look after the business in the region in Singapore. So, I got invited to look at this position, and lo and behold, I got a job, and it was 22 years with Hertz, 22 long and rewarding years. Yeah.
Wow. So I was going to ask you, which was the best and most memorable part of your career, but 22 years with one company probably says Hertz were where you enjoyed your time the most.
I suppose Hertz because of the region, right? Because it was the Asia region. So the region stretches from as far west as Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, all the way up to Japan, and up north we got China. Mm-hmm. So it's really a very big geography, and Asia is so diverse. There's so many interesting things happening every single year. So it didn't seem that long, 22, because every year there's always something new challenges, new opportunities. So you don't really feel that you're doing the same thing all the time. You're doing different things, different challenges. So that's what kept me going for so many years. Yeah.
Wow. So how did you first become associated or aware of PARTA? Was that through Hertz, or had you been involved before?
In fact, even in early days, it was in the mid 80s. I already had some contact with PARTA, but at that time was merely a participant in some of the events. But it was only in Hertz that I got more active. In fact, I joined the PARTA Singapore chapter because we also have a local chapter in Singapore. Mm-hmm. And after a couple of years, I was then elected to be the chairman of the PARTA Singapore chapter. So that was really the formal introduction into the PARTA organization.
Right. Perhaps.
And also as a company, because PARTA is a corporate membership, so it's not an individual membership. So Hertz, being in the travel and tourism business, we do attend PARTA events. So I get to know the organization a lot better by interacting with people in head office, in PARTA headquarters. Yeah.
Right. And just for those people who really have, just a superficial knowledge of PARTA, what are the aims and the objectives of the organization?
PARTA is a trade association. It caters to the travel and tourism business. And it's a global association. We have members all around the world. And we promote sustainable and responsible tourism to and from the Asia-Pacific region. So our membership is very diverse. In fact, we are rather unique in that we have both the public and the private sector membership. So we have members such as the airlines, the cruise lines, travel agents, the hotels, media, even new tech, new travel tech. We have got learning institutions. So it is very, very broad. In fact, anything and everything in the travel and tourism business, plus also government agencies such as national tourism organizations, tourism boards. So you see that there is a very close collaboration between private and public sector. So that's the unique part of PARTA. So very, very diverse in terms of geography, as well as the type of membership cutting across all travel verticals. Yeah.
Wow. So how many, it sounds an amazingly large organization, but I think in reality, it's very efficient and very effective, because I think how many employees do you have in PARTA?
Well, we have a team of people based in headquarters in Bangkok, some 24 people running the day-to-day activities of the association.
And you mentioned learning. One of the things I've noticed in many of the Parter events I've either been to or have in fact seen on the web is a heavy focus on skills transfer and learning and personal development. Is that central to everything that Parter is doing?
Well, first and foremost, I think we have to understand that travel and tourism is a huge ecosystem. Sometimes we tend to forget that, and if you look at what is happening today in this crisis, is a classic example. When planes are grounded, when people stop traveling, you can imagine the impact on the global economy. So it is a very, very big industry. So if you look at what is needed to make a trip, there are many, many players involved. You need the airlines, you need the accommodation, you need transportation. Even the retail people are part of this business. And if you look at F&B, so it is a very, very long travel chain. So learning is something that is ongoing all the time, because there are so many new things that needs to be updated. And more so now, especially after this crisis, right? Can you imagine what would have happened to the industry through this pandemic? So immediately after recovery, I think every one of us have to relearn and reimagine. So even more training and learning as we go forward. Yeah.
Do you know, I thought we were doing really well. We had nearly gone 10 minutes without mentioning the C word of COVID-19. But how has it impacted Parter from your perspective? I mean, clearly you had a 6-month delay in your appointment, but the members must have found this a really, really challenging moment in time.
Well, prior to taking on the chair position, I was vice chair, so very much involved in the strategic directions of the association for the past couple of years. And running an association is no different from running a business. We have got members, so members, if they are impacted, invariably they look at the cost of membership. Should they continue to be a member? How can they get maximum value from membership? And as an association, a lot of our activities are based on events. So we have got big events which we had to defer or cancel. So that has got a lot of impact, not only on the financial position of Parter as an association, but also for our members. And so as you can see, this industry is most severely impacted by the crisis. Yeah.
And when you cancelled those events, have you transformed into a digital event business? We've seen many companies who ran events try to move into that space. Have you been holding webinars and learning sessions?
Yeah, it's unbelievable how necessity is the mother of invention. When COVID hit, we had to figure out how to go about doing our day-to-day business. Now, the big thing about this crisis is that it is unprecedented. So there isn't a playbook. So when there isn't a playbook, you have more questions than answers. The truth is that nobody really knows the answers. But we need to figure out very quickly. So a lot of the early days would be just doing it, get on with it, and you learn as you go. And so it's quite amazing how, in a short span of like 8-9 months, Parter had over 100 events and activities. Most of them, almost entirely, all of them are online, digital, virtual, and some are on hybrid. And it is almost unthinkable, yeah.
It's strange. You're absolutely right. I mean, that, necessity is the mother of all invention, or indeed all evil, and makes us work longer and longer hours. But how's your members responded? I mean, there must be some that have found this really challenging in terms of future resizing, reshaping for a new recovery program. How have your members adapted? Have they all been learning through this crisis?
Our members are affected like everyone else. Yeah, sometimes they refer to this as something as if we are all in the same boat. They keep saying that we are all caught in the same boat, but I don't think so. Because some members could be big ocean liners, others could be just a small fishing boat. Mm-hmm. So we are not in the same boat, but we are caught in the same storm, right? So that is what is affecting the whole industry. So every member has to find a way of dealing with the crisis. Yeah, there's no one simple way. There isn't a prescriptive way to go through this crisis. So you have to look at your own resources and decide how you can stay afloat. But unfortunately, in something so big, there are casualties, and there will be more casualties if the borders stay closed here.
And touching on the borders, I mean, PATA has this very, as you mentioned, this pivotal position between private and public sectors. And I think many people in the private sector have become quite frustrated at the public sector response, and specifically control authorities and how they've handled the event. From your perspective, though, when we were chatting earlier, you mentioned how challenging it is for governments to be able to handle this event.
Governments have a job of protecting the nation, and in that case, protecting the people, the citizens, the residents. So it's no easy task to be able to do that and at the same time please all industries. Obviously, we are in the travel and tourism industry. We like them to look after our interests first. But I don't think we are the only people affected by the crisis. In fact, every business, every sector would be equally affected. Although I think the travel and tourism is probably more visible, right? Because every day people are complaining about not being able to travel. Mm-hmm. So perhaps that brings us into the limelight. Now, most countries in Asia, as far as I know, the people really leading the charge would be the health ministries or the health authorities rather than trade or tourism people. So if that is the case, then I think it is quite obvious that public health has to be the most important thing in their minds. And I think rightly so, because it's so important that we protect the health and safety of our people first. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you're a resident in Singapore, so you've experienced travel bubbles and circuit breakers and other such things. And obviously the Hong Kong Singapore travel corridor nearly arrived, but then at 24 hours was cancelled. And now there's talk of a new corridor with Taiwan from Singapore, I believe. Is that a solution, do you think, these corridors, or is that just a short-termism piece of PR? What's your thoughts on that?
For the Hong Kong-Singapore bubble, I recall just some weeks ago, we were in a webinar. STB was in the webinar. It was a BBC PATA initiative. And we were happily chatting about the bubble that is going to take place a few days later. And lo and behold, it had to be deferred. But this is exactly what we are dealing with right now because, the situation is so fluid. Every single morning when you wake up, there is something new. Mm-hmm. But to have the courage to do something, I think is really what is needed right now. It's so easy to just sit back and then say that, wow, it is too difficult, let's wait and see. But I don't think inaction is good. I'm sure when the Singapore government and the Hong Kong government came together to do this bubble, they are fully aware, or they were fully aware that there would be risks.
It's a very difficult thing, isn't it? Because you are damned if you do, and you are damned if you do not. And as you say, we've got to break through this. And if this is a way of recreating any travel, then that has to be a positive. But it does come with all of those preconditions, as you say. From your perspective, tourism has been such a very, very important part of the Asian emergent market story from so many perspectives. What is your sentiment about the future? Is this going to take many years to recover, or do you think we are just building up demand for travel that will happen as quickly as possible?
I think the general consensus, if you have been reading reports and all that, the airlines particularly, they are forecasting that it will take at least 3 to 4 years before you see demand climbing back to pre-crisis level. And I think that is pretty much a given. Yeah, it's not going to come back immediately back to previous high. It's going to build up slowly. Now, if you look at the economy, I think this is something that sometimes we may forget when we are talking about travel itself. We are all going through some form of recession in almost every single country. Mm-hmm. So in a normal recession, demand for goods and services will fall. So likewise, I think travel being a discretionary thing, we'll see the impact. People may want to travel, but they may not afford to travel. We don't know whether airfares will be higher or lower. In some instances, airfares have gone up because of limited capacity. So I think travel and tourism will go through a big change. We just have to make sure that the organization has to be right sized to deal with the new normal, like they say. Yeah, but it's already a new reality after so many months.
And in that sort of re-gauging, re-equipping of PARTA, and the last 9 months, what are the key things that you've learned or you've sensed during the pandemic period?
I think the pandemic in the last 9 months have driven digitalization to a new high. In the past, it would have taken a couple of years or 4 or 5 years before we get to this level of digital adoption. But driven by necessity, almost everything is done virtually or online. So this would mean that if you want to do business going forward, you need to be connected. You need to be fully equipped with this new way of doing business.
And do you think that is a long-term change, or is it because of the short-term necessity? Many companies are telling us that they are going to reduce their travel budgets. They don't need to travel so much. And yet the CEO of Delta Airlines, who clearly, Ed Bastian, who clearly has a very interested position in this, says the first time a salesperson loses a contract because he wasn't in the room, he'll be jumping on a plane again. What's your thoughts?
I think nothing beats a face-to-face meeting. After all, this is a people's business, right? Mm-hmm. So high tech is good, but we also need the high touch. But because we have been doing this for so many months, inevitably some of us would realize by now that it's actually quite efficient to do a lot of things, whether through Zoom calls or through any of the other technological platforms. So even if it's not going to be 100% virtual, I would say some percentage would go online. There is still that need for face-to-face meetings. So people will still travel. I think immediately after this, when it is safe to travel, people will travel, at least to reconnect. And going forward, then you calibrate your travel. But if you do 4 trips a year to a country, for example, for your sales meetings or sales calls, now if you have 2 meetings a year, it would mean that you're cutting it down by 50%. And that's a lot, right? So if one meeting would be 25% down, so this is something that we must be very aware that there will be less meetings here. Not that people don't need to meet, but there will be less, yeah.
And for PATA, of course, I mean, being a membership organisation, the interaction with the members and the personal contact with the members is a large part of what the organisation offers.
The interesting thing is that looking back on this 9 months or so, I think the interaction with members have actually gone up.
Because it's become easier with digital technology and people just accept it.
Absolutely, yeah. Whether it's in a meeting or events, I think the number of people participating is a lot higher than in the past. You don't get to see yourself physically, but on calls and all that, you get to see people, you talk to people. And I feel that it has driven people to be more interactive. Yeah, I'm sure you have attended more meetings than you had ever had before.
I'm sure I have. It's been a transformational 9 months for everyone. Talking of transformation, I mean, you've been involved with PATA for many years and changing the subject slightly. What are your aspirations for PATA in the coming years? I mean, clearly you're now the chair. You were the vice chair. You've seen how the organisation is shaping and its strategy. What are your aspirations?
Firstly, the wish for the travel and tourism industry is that we hope the vaccine will be effective. It will be rolled out quickly because vaccine is important, but vaccination is the one that saves lives. So until you are properly vaccinated, it's not helping. So this is going to take a certain period of time for the rollout to be complete. But we are a lot better now than some months ago. So there's a lot of positives going forward. So for PATA as an association, we had already transformed over these 9 months, whether we like it or not. The way we are doing our day-to-day business, the type of events, the interaction with our members, and more importantly, we work a lot with our partner associations, whether it's UNWTO, WTTC, a lot of business partners like OAG. I've never seen collaboration at this level. Yeah. In my 40 years, it is just simply amazing. Everyone is putting all the efforts together, to fight the crisis. So this augurs well for the future.
And is your objective more members? Or is it, an even higher level of membership support and service? Is it about education? Sustainable tourism. What are the things? If your position as chair was to be remembered for one thing, what would you want it to be remembered for?
Well, firstly, we are in a very unique situation right now for the association. We have just transformed ourselves, particularly in the area of organization redesign and governance structure. PATA is 70 years old next year. So this is really a very important milestone for us. And we are transforming the association in such a way that we want to make sure that our members get the value that they pay for. So we have changed a lot of governance structure. For example, our board members will all be elected. In the past, it was a nomination process. But now, every single board member will be elected. And likewise for the executive board. Same thing for the officers like the vice chair and going forward the chair as well. So we want to make sure that we give our members all the opportunities to have their voices heard. Yeah.
I was on a webinar last week, I think, and a question came in from a listener that I think is very appropriate for someone in your position to answer. And basically they were saying they've done a degree in tourism, and is there a career for them in tourism in the coming years after COVID-19? How would you answer that question?
I think travel and tourism was the largest industry in the world in terms of employment before the crisis. And I think it will continue to be the most important, if not one of the most important industries in the world. So in terms of employment, there are always opportunities there, except that perhaps the skill set needed may differ from the past. Because if you look at what is happening to the technology part of the business, so you need people who know how to deal with this new technology. So I would say that, travel and tourism as an industry, as a business, will continue to be very, very important. It will, when business comes back, people have time and money, they have to travel and they want to travel. Right? All of us are suffering from cabin fever. We want to get on the road. So as an industry, no doubt about it, it is not a sunset business. So the jobs will be there. It's a question of how you very quickly make sure that you can recalibrate your own skill sets to meet the demands of the new business.
And flexibility is absolutely required, I think, for everyone now.
Yes, I think flexibility, the one who can adapt fastest and best to the changing environment will be the one to survive and thrive. Yeah.
I have a bit more of a personal question, which I'm fascinated by. So you are an industry, in the nicest possible term, veteran with many years' experience. And it always fascinates me when I speak to people such as yourself as, where is the one place in the world you would go back to, or that you still have not been, that you need to get?
To go back to, or to a new place?
Either or. Where is that one place you need on your bucket list to either return or visit for the first time?
For the first time, I would like to visit a place in China called Xinjiang. Yeah.
And
it's just a very fascinating place. I have read about it. I've watched videos and all that, but never had a chance to personally visit the place. Yeah.
And what is the attraction there? Is it just the scenery or the history? What is
the scenery, the people, the culture, the history? Yeah. So it's just very fascinating to me. Yeah.
And to return to a location you've been before?
Many, many beautiful places in the world. New Zealand is certainly one place I would like to revisit. Haven't been there for a while.
You need to get a job again with Air New Zealand. I'm sure they'd be delighted to help you.
Perhaps as an advisor or something.
Yeah, that would be good. And in that whole thing, I mean, from you've got considerable experience. Another question, I think, from your perspective, that you may be able to answer, looking from the outside in, is the future low-cost airlines, or is it legacy airlines, or is there a role for both?
I think it will be a hybrid kind of a model. There will always be people who can afford to travel business class, while some of them would want the cheapest possible fare. So I think both will coexist. Yeah, there won't be a one thing that fits all. Yeah.
Right, and to put you on the spot about the vaccine and the recovery, we're all much more excited and optimistic about the recovery. But when do you think we will be in a position to actually begin to really see that recovery? Is it Q1 of next year, 2021, Q2, Q3? What's your reading of when the recovery is really going to start?
For me, just a personal guess, I would say perhaps Q3 to Q4 next year. Yeah. Because the first half year, even if a vaccine ready, it has to be rolled out. People need to be vaccinated. So that will take time because this is a global pandemic. So even if your country is good and if your neighbors are not good, then it's not going to help very much, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to wait. You got to wait for everyone to be vaccinated, and then I think we have to rebuild travel confidence. Let's not underestimate, the fact that it does take some effort and time for people to want to return to travel. They love to travel. They miss travel, but it is still a process. Yeah.
And that confidence is the key thing, isn't it? How do we as airlines, airports, trade associations such as PARTA, how do we collectively build that confidence? Have you been thinking about that, or have any thoughts about how can we rebuild that whole, confidence to jump on an aeroplane and go somewhere?
I think first and foremost, as you rightly said, we are the collective voice of the industry. So all the associations, all the travel and tourism associations are in fact working very closely together to try to advocate a common protocol, especially a health and safety protocol. Because if you don't do that, then you'll find that, when you go to every single airport, there is a different set of routine that you have to get through. When you get on board, every airline is different. When you arrive, there's a different set of procedures. So that would be very, very challenging. I think all the associations are coming together to try to make sure that, we work together as one. So for instance, very recently, PATA together with several associations, including IATA and ICAO, right? We are urging governments. To adopt a certain common protocol so that we can have the consistency and harmonization in cross-border travel protocols. Mm-hmm. So an open letter was recently sent to Asia-Pacific ministers of health, transport, tourism, interior, foreign affairs to adopt the ICAO risk assessment and testing framework in lieu of quarantine. So this is just a small example of how the associations are coming together so that we have a big collective voice appealing to governments to adopt the same protocol where possible. We fully understand and respect the fact that every country is different, but we got to start somewhere. So at least collectively, we are presenting a common protocol. And I'm sure you have read about travel pass, common pass. All these things will come together. So if all these are eventually in place, it will help a lot in building travel confidence. So travelers, once they see this, they know what to expect. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So one final question on confidence. How confident are you about the future of travel and tourism? Are you just confident, very confident, extremely confident? What is your sentiment at this moment?
See, recovery is not if, but when. Yeah. Recovery will start at some point. We have been very resilient for the last 9 months. It's not very far away. The vaccine is already here. So I am 100% confident that the industry will start to bounce back. It's not one that needs to be questioned. It will be a very, very important industry for the future.
On that note, which I absolutely agree with. Thank you very much for your time. Been a pleasure to speak to you. Good luck for the next 18 months as you sit in that chair. Lots of work to do, and I'm sure it will be a great success. So, Soon-Hwa, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, John. Yeah, pleasure.